My name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. 5 years ago, I thought I had found the love of my life in Marcus. We had been together for 3 years, living in a modest apartment in downtown Chicago, sharing dreams of marriage, children, and growing old together. Marcus worked as a sales manager at a car dealership, and I was finishing my master's degree in business administration while working part-time at a local marketing firm. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy, or so I believed. Our relationship felt solid, built on trust, laughter, and countless late-night conversations about our future. I genuinely thought Marcus was my forever person, the man who would stand by me through thick and thin. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday evening in October when I discovered I was pregnant. I had been feeling nauseous for weeks, and after missing my period, I finally worked up the courage to take a pregnancy test. Seeing those two pink lines appear, my heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I imagined Marcus's face lighting up when I told him the news, picturing us decorating a nursery together and choosing baby names. That night, I planned a special dinner, lit candles, and waited for him to come home from work. When he walked through the door, soaked from the rain and complaining about his difficult day, I took his hands and gently told him we were going to be parents. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Marcus's face went completely pale, and he pulled his hands away from mine as if I had burned him. "Sarah, this can't be happening right now," he said, his voice shaking with panic rather than joy. "I'm not ready for this responsibility. We can barely afford to take care of ourselves, let alone a baby." His words cut through me like a knife, but I tried to remain calm and understanding. I explained that we could make it work, that plenty of couples started families with less than what we had. I talked about my upcoming graduation, my job prospects, and how we could budget and plan together. But Marcus just kept shaking his head, pacing around our small living room like a caged animal. "You don't understand," he said. "This changes everything." Over the next few weeks, Marcus became distant and cold. He would come home late from work, claiming he had extra responsibilities, and he stopped engaging in our usual conversations about the future. When I tried to discuss baby preparations or doctor's appointments, he would change the subject or find an excuse to leave the room. I felt increasingly alone and confused, wondering what had happened to the man who used to tell me he wanted to spend his life with me. Friends and family began asking about Marcus's absence from gatherings, and I found myself making excuses for his behavior. Deep down, I knew something was seriously wrong, but I kept hoping he would come around and embrace the idea of becoming a father. I was desperately trying to hold our relationship together while dealing with morning sickness and the emotional roller coaster of early pregnancy. The breaking point came on a cold November morning when I was 12 weeks pregnant. I woke up to find Marcus stuffing clothes into a suitcase, moving with the urgency of someone trying to escape. "What are you doing?" I asked, though I already knew the answer in my heart. He couldn't even look me in the eye when he spoke. "Sarah, I can't do this. I'm not cut out to be a father, and I can't pretend anymore. I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I need to leave before this goes any further." His words felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's nightmare unfold. I begged him to reconsider, to give us a chance to work things out, but he was already mentally gone. Within an hour, he had packed his belongings and walked out of our apartment, leaving me alone and pregnant. The months that followed were the most challenging of my life. I moved back in with my parents temporarily, feeling like a failure despite their unwavering support. My mother held me while I cried, assuring me that Marcus's departure revealed his true character, not my worth as a person. My father, normally a gentle man, expressed anger I had never seen before, calling Marcus a coward for abandoning his responsibilities. Despite their love and encouragement, I struggled with feelings of rejection and abandonment. How could someone who claimed to love me walk away when I needed them most? I threw myself into completing my degree and job hunting, determined to provide for my child regardless of Marcus's absence. The pregnancy progressed normally, and with each ultrasound appointment, I felt more connected to the tiny life growing inside me. My daughter Emma was born on a beautiful spring morning, and the moment I held her in my arms, I understood what unconditional love truly meant. She had Marcus's dark hair, but my green eyes, and she was absolutely perfect. Despite the circumstances of her conception and the pain of raising her alone, Emma brought joy and purpose to my life that I never knew was possible. My parents were incredible grandparents, helping with childcare while I started my new job at a prestigious marketing agency in the city. The work was demanding but rewarding, and I quickly proved myself capable of handling major accounts and complex campaigns. Emma and I settled into a comfortable routine, and slowly, the wounds Marcus had left began to heal. I realized I was stronger than I ever imagined. 2 years passed, and my career flourished beyond my wildest expectations. The marketing agency promoted me to senior account manager, and I successfully led campaigns for several high-profile clients. My innovative strategies and dedication to excellence caught the attention of industry leaders, and I was headhunted by a larger firm offering double my salary. Emma was thriving in daycare, developing her own personality and bringing constant laughter to our home. We had moved into a beautiful apartment with a view of the lake, and I was finally feeling financially secure and emotionally whole. The single motherhood that once terrified me had become a source of pride and strength. I had built a good life for Emma and myself, proving that we didn't need Marcus to be complete. Still, there were quiet moments when I wondered about him and whether he ever thought about the daughter he had never met. What I didn't know was that my grandfather, who had passed away when Emma was 18 months old, had left me something extraordinary in his will. Grandpa Joe had always been secretive about his finances, living modestly despite owning several properties and making smart investments throughout his life. The probate process was lengthy and complicated, involving lawyers and estate managers I had never met. When his attorney finally called me into the office for the final reading of the will, I expected perhaps a small inheritance or a piece of family jewelry. Instead, I learned that my grandfather had left me his entire estate, worth over $2 million, including 3 rental properties, a substantial stock portfolio, and a trust fund specifically designated for Emma's education. I sat in that lawyer's office in complete shock, unable to process the magnitude of this unexpected blessing. The inheritance transformed our lives in ways I never could have imagined. I was able to quit my demanding job and start my own marketing consultancy, working with clients I chose while maintaining a flexible schedule that allowed me to spend more time with Emma. We moved into a beautiful house with a backyard where Emma could play safely, and I enrolled her in the best preschool in the area. For the first time since Marcus left, I felt truly secure about our future. The financial stress that had been a constant undercurrent in my life completely disappeared, replaced by the freedom to make choices based on what was best for Emma and me, rather than what we could afford. I was careful not to be ostentatious about our new circumstances, maintaining the same close friendships and staying grounded in the values my parents had taught me. News of my inheritance spread slowly through our small community, as these things tend to do. I hadn't made a big announcement, but between the new house, Emma's private school, and my reduced work schedule, people began to piece together that something significant had changed in our financial situation. I was always discreet about the details, simply saying that my grandfather had been more successful than we realized and had left me well provided for. Most friends and family members were genuinely happy for our good fortune, understanding that I had worked hard as a single mother and deserved some financial security. However, I also noticed some relationships changing, with certain acquaintances suddenly becoming more interested in spending time with me. I learned to navigate these new dynamics carefully, staying true to the people who had supported me during my most difficult times. Emma was now 3 years old, bright and curious about everything around her. She asked occasional questions about her daddy, and I always answered honestly but age-appropriately, explaining that some daddies live far away, but that didn't mean anything was wrong with her. She seemed satisfied with these explanations and was surrounded by so much love from my parents, my siblings, and our close friends that she never appeared to feel lacking in any way. We had built a beautiful life together, filled with trips to the zoo, playground adventures, bedtime stories, and dance parties in our living room. I had started dating occasionally, though I was very selective about bringing anyone around Emma. The trauma of Marcus's abandonment had made me cautious about trusting men with my heart, but I was slowly opening myself to the possibility of finding love again. It was during this period of stability and happiness that Marcus suddenly reappeared in our lives. I was at the grocery store with Emma on a Saturday afternoon when I heard someone call my name from behind. Turning around, I saw a face I recognized but had changed significantly over the 3 years since I'd last seen it. Marcus looked older, more weathered, wearing an ill-fitting suit and sporting a nervous smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sarah," he said, approaching cautiously as if I might flee. "I can't believe it's really you. You look incredible." Emma hid behind my legs, sensing the tension in my body even though she couldn't understand its source. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady and polite. "Hello, Marcus. This is Emma." I watched as he looked down at his daughter for the first time, and I saw something flicker across his face that might have been regret. Marcus asked if we could talk, and despite every instinct telling me to walk away, I agreed to meet him for coffee the following week. Emma stayed with my parents while I sat across from the man who had shattered my world 3 years earlier. He looked nervous and kept fidgeting with his coffee cup as he launched into what seemed like a prepared speech about how sorry he was for leaving, how he had been young and scared, and how he had made the biggest mistake of his life. "I heard about your grandfather," he said eventually, and suddenly his motivation for this reunion became crystal clear. "I also heard that you're doing really well for yourself now, and I'm so proud of how you've turned your life around." The way he said it, as if he had somehow contributed to my success, made my stomach turn. His next words confirmed my suspicions. "I've been thinking a lot about Emma and about being a father." I listened to Marcus explain how he had spent the last 3 years finding himself and was now ready to step up and be the father Emma deserved. He talked about his new job, though he was vague about the details, and his new apartment, though he didn't mention the address. He spoke about wanting to build a relationship with Emma, and eventually perhaps rebuilding what we once had together. "I know I hurt you, Sarah, but people change. I've changed. I want to be part of Emma's life, and I want to be part of your life too." As he spoke, I studied his face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or love, but all I could see was calculation and opportunism. This wasn't the return of a repentant father. This was the arrival of someone who had heard about money and saw an opportunity. The realization filled me with a cold, quiet anger that I had never experienced before. What Marcus didn't know was that I had learned a great deal about protecting myself and my daughter over the past 3 years. The inheritance had come with excellent legal advice, and I had established trusts and legal structures that protected our assets from exactly this type of situation. I had also developed a network of successful, intelligent friends who had taught me to recognize manipulation and opportunism when I saw it. Most importantly, I had learned to trust my instincts, and every instinct I possessed was screaming that Marcus's sudden interest in fatherhood was directly connected to rumors about my financial situation. I kept my expression neutral as he continued his pitch, but inside, I was already formulating a plan to handle this situation with the dignity and strength I had developed as a single mother. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became increasingly persistent in his attempts to insert himself into our lives. He called regularly, sent flowers to my office, and even showed up at Emma's preschool claiming he wanted to meet his daughter. The school, following my strict instructions, refused him access and called me immediately. I realized I needed to take decisive action to protect Emma and myself from his manipulation. I scheduled a meeting with my attorney, who helped me understand my rights as Emma's sole custodial parent and advised me on how to handle Marcus's sudden reappearance. We discussed documentation, restraining orders if necessary, and the importance of maintaining detailed records of all his interactions with us. Armed with legal knowledge and professional guidance, I felt prepared to handle whatever Marcus might try next. The confrontation I had been dreading came on a Thursday evening when Marcus showed up at our house unannounced. Emma was already in bed, and I was reviewing client proposals in my home office when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Marcus holding a bouquet of roses and wearing what I assumed he thought was a charming smile. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "We need to talk, Sarah," he said. "I've been patient. But I deserve to have a relationship with my daughter." The word deserve hit me like a slap in the face. This man who had abandoned us when we needed him most, who had disappeared for 3 years without a single phone call or birthday card, now believed he deserved access to the beautiful, intelligent, loving child he had rejected. I felt something shift inside me, a protective fury that had been building since the day he first reached out. "You're right, Marcus," I said calmly, stepping outside and closing the door behind me so our conversation wouldn't disturb Emma. "We do need to talk." I led him to the front porch and gestured for him to sit down. "First, let's discuss what you deserve. You deserve nothing from Emma and nothing from me. You had your chance to be a father, and you chose to abandon your pregnant girlfriend instead. You deserve exactly what you gave us for 3 years. Absolutely nothing." Marcus tried to interrupt, claiming he had been young and scared, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Second, let's talk about why you're really here. You didn't have some sudden paternal awakening. You heard about money and you saw an opportunity. You're not here because you love Emma. You're here because you think I owe you something." Marcus's facade began to crumble as I continued speaking. His charming smile disappeared, replaced by the petulant expression of someone whose manipulation wasn't working as planned. "That's not true," he protested. "I've grown up. I've changed. I want to be a good father to Emma and a good partner to you." But his words rang hollow, and I could see the desperation behind his eyes. "Even if I believed you had changed," I replied, "which I don't, it's too late. Emma has a wonderful life filled with people who have been there for her since birth. She doesn't need a father who shows up when it's convenient and profitable for him." I explained that he had no legal rights to Emma, having never been listed on her birth certificate or contributed to her support in any way. "If you truly cared about her welfare rather than my bank account, you would understand that disrupting her stable, happy life would be selfish and harmful." The conversation that followed revealed Marcus's true character more clearly than I could have hoped. When his attempts at manipulation failed, he became angry and demanding. He threatened to take me to court for visitation rights, claimed that Emma needed her biological father, and accused me of being vindictive and selfish for keeping them apart. "You can't just keep my daughter from me because you're bitter about the past," he said, his voice rising with frustration. I remained calm and measured in my responses, which seemed to infuriate him even more. Marcus, Emma isn't your daughter in any meaningful sense of the word. She's my daughter, raised by me and my family, supported by people who chose to be in her life rather than people who felt entitled to be there. His threats about legal action only confirmed my suspicions about his motivations, and I felt a sense of clarity about how to proceed. What happened next was both predictable and pathetic. Marcus began researching my financial situation more aggressively, asking mutual acquaintances about my inheritance and trying to determine exactly how much money was involved. He started showing up at places he thought I might be, claiming coincidence but clearly stalking my movements. He sent increasingly desperate messages about wanting to do the right thing for Emma and build a real family together. One particularly revealing text message stated that he had learned from his mistakes and was now ready to provide the stability and security Emma deserves. The irony of a man with no stable job or permanent address promising to provide security was almost laughable. I saved every message, documented every appearance, and shared everything with my attorney, building a comprehensive record of his harassment and opportunistic behavior. The final straw came when Marcus approached my parents at their church, attempting to manipulate them into supporting his cause. He told them a sob story about being a changed man who desperately wanted to know his daughter, painting me as an unforgiving woman who was denying Emma her birthright. What Marcus hadn't anticipated was that my parents had lived through those difficult years with me, had seen me cry myself to sleep while pregnant and alone, had helped raise Emma from birth, and had no patience for his sudden conversion to fatherhood. My father, normally the most diplomatic man alive, reportedly told Marcus that he had forfeited any claim to Emma the day he walked out on his pregnant girlfriend, and that his transparent attempt to access our family's money was disgusting and shameful. My mother was even less diplomatic, according to witnesses who overheard the conversation. At this point, I realized that Marcus would never stop his pursuit unless I took definitive action. I scheduled a final meeting with him, this time in my attorney's office with a witness present. I wanted everything documented and legal, with no room for misinterpretation or future claims about what was said. Marcus arrived expecting another opportunity to plead his case, but instead found himself facing a restraining order and a clear legal warning about the consequences of continued harassment. "You have no legal rights to Emma," my attorney explained. "Sarah has been her sole parent since birth, and your name appears nowhere on any legal documents. Your recent behavior constitutes harassment, and any further unwanted contact will result in criminal charges." The look of shock on Marcus's face would have been amusing if the situation weren't so serious and potentially dangerous. I also presented Marcus with a comprehensive dossier of his behavior over the past 2 months, including photographs of him following me, copies of his increasingly desperate messages, and witness statements about his attempts to manipulate my family members. "This is who you really are," I told him. "You're not a father seeking his child. You're a predator seeking money. You had 3 years to develop genuine interest in Emma's welfare, but you only appeared after hearing about financial gain." I explained that any attempt to contact Emma, me, or any member of our family would result in immediate legal action. You made your choice 3 years ago when you decided that being a father was too difficult and expensive. That choice has consequences, and those consequences are permanent. The meeting ended with Marcus signing acknowledgement of the restraining order and slinking out of the office like the coward he had always been. Life returned to peaceful normalcy after Marcus's forced exit from our lives, but the experience had taught me valuable lessons about protecting Emma and myself from people with ulterior motives. I became more selective about sharing information regarding our circumstances and more careful about vetting new people who wanted to enter our social circle. Emma, blissfully unaware of the drama that had unfolded around her, continued thriving in her preschool and developing her own interests and friendships. We took a wonderful vacation to Disney World that summer, just the two of us, and I watched her face light up with pure joy as she met her favorite princesses and rode the carousel for the 10th time in one day. Those moments reminded me why I had fought so hard to protect our happiness from Marcus's selfish interference. The inheritance from my grandfather had given us financial security, but more importantly, it had given me the resources and confidence to stand up to manipulation and protect what mattered most. I invested wisely, ensuring that Emma would have educational opportunities and security throughout her life, regardless of what challenges we might face. I also used some of the money to establish a scholarship fund for single mothers pursuing higher education, wanting to help other women who might be struggling as I once had. The legal fees for dealing with Marcus had been substantial, but they were a worthwhile investment in our peace of mind and safety. I learned that sometimes the cost of protecting your family from toxic people is simply the price of freedom and happiness. As months passed without any contact from Marcus, I began to relax and focus on building our future. Emma started showing interest in music, so I enrolled her in a toddler music class where she could explore rhythm and melody with other children her age. My consulting business grew steadily, allowing me to work with fascinating clients while maintaining the flexibility to be present for Emma's important moments. We established traditions like Saturday morning pancakes, Sunday afternoon zoo visits, and bedtime stories that always ended with Emma requesting just one more chapter. Our house became a gathering place for family celebrations, filled with laughter, good food, and the kind of warmth that comes from being surrounded by people who genuinely care about each other's well-being. I also began dating someone new, a kind pediatrician named David, who I met through mutual friends. Unlike Marcus, David was stable, mature, and genuinely interested in getting to know both Emma and me as individuals, rather than as a package deal or financial opportunity. He was patient with Emma's initial shyness and never tried to rush into a parental role, understanding that trust and relationships take time to develop. Our courtship was slow and thoughtful, built on shared values and genuine compatibility rather than passion alone. Emma gradually warmed up to David, especially after he taught her how to make paper airplanes and proved himself capable of reading bedtime stories with appropriate character voices. I found myself believing in love again, though I remained cautious about protecting the stability Emma and I had worked so hard to create. The contrast between David's approach to our relationship and Marcus's manipulative behavior couldn't have been more stark. David never asked about my financial situation, never tried to move too quickly toward commitment, and never made demands of his role in Emma's life. He was content to earn our trust through consistency, kindness, and respect for our existing family structure. When Emma called him David, rather than any paternal nickname, he was perfectly comfortable with that boundary. When she wanted to include him in activities, he was delighted to participate. When she needed space or time alone with me, he graciously stepped back without taking it personally. This mature, respectful approach made me realize how toxic and selfish Marcus's behavior had been from the very beginning of our relationship, long before Emma was even conceived. 2 years after Marcus's failed attempt to insert himself into our lives, I received a phone call that brought the story full circle. It was from a mutual friend who had remained in contact with Marcus, calling to let me know that he had been arrested for attempting to defraud an elderly woman out of her retirement savings. Apparently, his pattern of targeting women for financial gain hadn't ended with me, and he had moved on to more vulnerable victims when his efforts to access our family's money had failed. The details were sickening. He had convinced a lonely widow that he loved her and wanted to marry her, then gradually gained access to her bank accounts and investment information. Fortunately, her adult children had become suspicious and involved law enforcement before he could complete his scheme. He was facing multiple felony charges and likely prison time for elder abuse and financial fraud. The news confirmed everything I had believed about Marcus's character and motivations. He wasn't a man who had made mistakes and learned from them. He was a predator who targeted women for financial exploitation. His sudden interest in Emma had never been about fatherhood or family. It had been about identifying and accessing resources he felt entitled to claim. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness hearing about his arrest. Vindication that my instincts had been correct, and sadness that other women had suffered because of his manipulative behavior. Most importantly, I felt grateful that I had possessed the strength, resources, and legal support necessary to protect Emma and myself from his schemes. Not every woman in my situation would have been so fortunate, and that reality made me even more committed to helping other single mothers through my scholarship fund and advocacy work. Emma, now 5 years old and preparing to start kindergarten, remained completely unaware of the drama that had surrounded her early childhood. She was a confident, happy child who knew she was loved unconditionally by many people and had never experienced the instability or manipulation that Marcus would have brought to her life. David had become a steady presence in our family, and Emma had begun referring to him as her special friend, who took her on adventures and helped her build elaborate Lego constructions. We weren't rushing toward marriage or formal commitments, but our relationship was built on the solid foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection that I had never experienced with Marcus. Emma's security and happiness remained my primary concern, and David understood and supported that priority completely. Looking back on the entire experience, I realized that Marcus's abandonment, though devastating at the time, had actually been a blessing in disguise. If he had stayed, Emma and I would have been trapped in a relationship with someone who was fundamentally selfish and unreliable. His departure forced me to develop independence, strength, and discernment that served us well when he attempted to return for the wrong reasons. The inheritance gave us financial security, but more importantly, it revealed Marcus's true character and allowed me to protect Emma from his influence. We had built a beautiful life filled with people who chose to love us, rather than people who felt entitled to exploit us. And that distinction made all the difference in our happiness and security. As I write this story, Emma is thriving in first grade, excited about learning to read, and fascinated by everything from dinosaurs to space exploration. She has friends, interests, and dreams that are entirely her own, developed in an environment free from manipulation and instability. David and I are planning a summer vacation together, our first as a family unit, and Emma is already making lists of all the things she wants to see and do. My consulting business continues to grow, allowing me to contribute meaningfully to causes I care about while maintaining the flexibility to be present for Emma's childhood milestones. We live in a beautiful home filled with laughter, surrounded by family and friends who have proven their loyalty through both difficult times and celebrations. The moral of this story isn't about money or karma, though both played important roles in our journey. It's about the importance of recognizing your own worth and refusing to accept treatment that diminishes your dignity or safety. It's about understanding that some people will only value you when they think you have something to offer them, and learning to distinguish between genuine love and calculated opportunism. Most importantly, it's about the incredible strength that can emerge from adversity and the beautiful life that becomes possible when you refuse to let other people's limitations define your future. Marcus thought he could waltz back into our lives when it became financially advantageous, but he discovered that some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. If you're facing a similar situation, trust your instincts about people's motivations and don't let anyone convince you to accept less than you deserve. Surround yourself with people who support your growth and happiness rather than people who see you as a means to an end. Build your own strength and security so that you can make choices based on what's best for you and your children, not what's convenient for people who haven't earned the right to be in your life. Most importantly, remember that being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who doesn't truly value and respect you. Emma and I learned that lesson the hard way, but we emerged stronger, happier, and more secure than we ever could have been if Marcus had remained in our lives. So what would you do if someone who abandoned you during your most vulnerable moment suddenly reappeared when your circumstances improved? Would you give them a second chance, or would you trust your instincts about their true motivations? I hope you'll share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed hearing about our journey from heartbreak to happiness, please subscribe so you don't miss future stories. Every experience teaches us something valuable about ourselves and others, and I believe sharing these lessons helps all of us make better choices in our own lives. Thank you for listening to our story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize and appreciate it.